Hey, welcome back, everybody. I'm Jeff Dudan, and we're here today on the Unemployable podcast. Today's guest is someone who redefines what's possible. Kyle Maynard was born without arms and legs, yet he's climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, competed as a champion wrestler, and inspires audiences worldwide with his unbreakable will. This conversation will uncover the mindset and habits that let him conquer every mountain, literal and figurative. Get ready to be challenged and inspired. Here's my conversation with Kyle Maynard. Today, we are honored to have an incredible guest on, Kyle Maynard. Welcome, Kyle.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Jeff.
Yeah, excited that you're on. As usual, I went dove into your content, both online and also I got a copy of your book. And for those that don't know you, you were born with a congenital amputation, which means that you were born without limbs basically below your elbows and below your knees.
Right. So it's it was unknown as to what caused it. But it was, the ultrasound technology too was a lot different back then. So my parents, they, it kind of came as a big surprise. And I think they had, normal ultrasounds at first and then ended up, realizing things were going to be a lot different. And I remember my grandmother telling my mom, she said that, if you just look at his face, look at his smile, you'll know that everything will be okay. And that's, I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned later was Richard Bandler. He was the founder of neurolinguistic programming, one of the co-founders. He said that where the attention goes, the energy flows. So it's like basically, I think for them, kind of came as a big surprise, early on. And I think the nature of then kind of trying to figure out like how to work with things, I think was pretty key. But I think their strategy for the most part was to try to keep things just as normal as possible, to not focus on the limitations, to try to focus on the things that I was capable of doing. And, just from learning how to feed myself to, get dressed, day-to-day stuff, it was kind of this like lesson of normalcy, I think, more than anything. They tried to really instill that in me more than anything else. We just didn't really talk about it. It was one of those things, it was like a Jedi mind trick. They just, didn't really focus on the disability. So it was something that didn't really become like a huge deal.
They handled it the way that you would hope that parents would handle it. No hesitation, complete resolve, and really a commitment with your grandparents moving to be near you, to basically give you that normalcy, whether that be through, helping you with, play street hockey or video games, and really gave you a great life in terms of exposure and experiences and all of that. And like myself, when we had our kids, I've got 3, 20, the oldest is 25. I mean, we didn't have a lot of resources at the time, and they didn't either. But if we wait until you can afford to have kids, you'll never have them. So, that's really, just go ahead and do it. But that was an extra challenge for them at the time, because I just remember you talking about how your father was looking at it. He's like, I don't even have a job right now. And I think he was getting ready to go back to school, and, their life just changed in the way, their perspective of the things that they were going to need to do to give you all of the things that have made you who you are today. So really, and also too, I think there's a picture of you in the book when you're like 3, spitting image of my son. I was just like, you guys are doppelgangers, my oldest, you and him at that age. So, and you kind of favor each other right now, don't you think, Jen? I actually do. So, anyway, so you were fortunate to be able to have family that was to be able to move with you and help you through that. There was a question around prosthetics that popped up, and the technology of the day was it was a little bit unwieldy. It didn't really help you. It was maybe more for appearances than it was for form and function. How did you guys wrestle with that decision, and ultimately, what did you do?
Back in the day with the like prosthetics, you had like a system with like hooks and like pulleys and then like straps. And so you kind of like move your like back and shoulders in different ways and try to like open and close these hooks. And for me, for my arms to kind of come at a point to go and pick up something and grab something, then it was just kind of natural. And then I put out the prosthetics and it was really difficult to go and do anything. So like, there was these legs too, legs were basically like there was a buckle to go and collapse the knees. Otherwise they were just kind of like giant stilts. And I would just go and use a walker to walk with and kind of lean on the walker. But, it impaired me way more than it helped. I tried them again when I was a little bit older. It was like 8th grade. But that was the last time I tried them. I kind of like periodically keep up with stuff. I'm sure that like Boston Dynamics or something's going to go and make some kind of like crazy exoskeleton in the future that would be, fun to like use.
For sure.
But, I think it's not really something that I've, I just use a wheelchair to go and get around for the most part. I feel fortunate in that way, in that regard. I mean, I think that like when you have a disability, I think it exposes you to a lot of things of like, where like the lack of mobility exists in a lot of different ways, especially in like older buildings and structures too. You go to like a courthouse or something like that. It's like an older building that just is impossible to kind of navigate or get around, or like cobblestone streets, without going travel through Europe and like, go through some of these like older areas with these like cobblestone roads. And it's just a complete nightmare to try to go and get around.
You have described yourself as an athlete driven by competition. And the book's fantastic as it talks about, man, like what you did to compete in football and all of that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you approached athletics early in your career, and then ultimately how it came to wrestling as being your sport?
I think competition for sure has always been an enormous aspect. Every, like close friend that I've had, I think has been like, highly competitive in some way or some regard. And I think it's that like spirit and drive. I think that like, just to better ourselves, to learn as much as we can, to go and grow in some different kind of way. I think it's, so much of that is, I think that's what excites me more than anything else. I think that like I think the nature of the types of things that I've been drawn to in terms of competition, I think over the years, I think that's kind of changed and evolved, expanded for sure. But I think it's pretty universal. I remember like, as a kid, making my first tackle in football certainly changed my life, undoubtedly, and like, I think it gave me like that sense of like purpose and contribution. The way that I'd go and tackle people, I'd just go and take my helmet and smash it into their legs as hard as I could. I was down on all fours. And so, the running backs were not looking at the ground. They were looking at the linebackers and the safeties. And that was kind of my advantage. In wrestling, it was kind of a similar thing too, where it was like, I was stronger than a lot of people that I was going up against because of like the, weight class, but then there are other things I would go and give up, and obviously like, reach and things of that nature. And then I think, later on from jiu-jitsu and MMA, it was kind of controversial in me competing in a lot of ways. And, kind of managed to go and fight through kind of a different thing with that, and experiencing like the governmental side of things. And mountain climbing was a completely different, animal. And mountain climbing from an endurance perspective was not a, wrestling match is 6 minutes long. A mountain climb is just weeks of just complete suffering. And like, but it's also, just beautiful experience, and the ability to be able to go and, have that like, kind of bond through the whole time too. I mean, I think it's, they're just amazing experiences. And from, business perspective and studying, I mean, like you think about like competition in business and like different things, I mean, for you competing for an audience with a podcast, for me, speeches, for, large business, a small business, like studying that nature of competition too is, that's one of my favorite things now is, from a hobbyist perspective, and hopefully at some point, I think, from a career perspective too, to be able to do more of that. But, the whole history of that and competition in general, I think is just, it's so deeply ingrained in us as human beings, as who and what we are. Some of my closest friends that I've made over the last few years have been in the SEAL teams, and like special memories with them and seeing them in places where they were completely like, broken and defeated in so many different ways, but they found a way to be able to go and push through to the other side. And that to me is like, there's something special inside of that. I think there's something special inside of the human spirit that like, allows us to be able to like, get to the place where we can test ourselves and, find that point at which we feel as if, we're broken and there's no other way. And like, that we're forced to go and give up, and that we don't. I think that is like fundamentally just a huge part of what it means to be, a human being.
Uniquely human. Your mom was a rock in your life. She was an advocate. I think you had said that, your father and you were both probably, she would be the one that would make the phone call and say, hey, we're coming out for the football team, or we're doing those things. How did she react when you immediately went towards collision and combat and extreme sports? Because you went right into the nose tackle position as a sixth grader at probably 60 pounds. And you went right on that team and started mixing it up in the middle of a defensive line. Did she ever, was she always 100% supportive of the things that you wanted to do? Or was she like, hey, Kyle, maybe not this right now?
I think there was, I think they had kind of like mixed feelings about a lot of things. I think if I were to take a couple of examples, I opened up a CrossFit gym back in like 2008. And incidentally, it was right as the market crashed. I think,
right.
I had my money like from, like the book deal and all of that, like sitting inside of a Fidelity account, and lost, a significant amount of it. And I was like, had this massive distrust over like other people, managing like, my money. I was like, okay, now I'm going to go in and invest in this gym. So I went and started the gym, and it was, it was a massive challenge at first. And I remember them, cautioning me, I mean, for me, I was kind of like a bull in a china shop. Like I was just raring to go. Like it ended up being like a 3,000 square foot building, but I wanted something that was like, much bigger. And they were like, this is probably not the right time to go and do it. But then conversely, I was thinking in my head, I was in my mid 20s at the time. I wasn't, you're son's age, right? So it wasn't really thinking like, I think in terms of like a, sound investor. I think I was just, I just so wanted the experience of having like the gym, and I was so ready for that like entrepreneurial side of my journey. And I remember like the building that I wanted to go and get, I mean, it was just a massive overhead. I was gung-ho on trying to, make it happen, and kind of, realized too that like, I mean, I could go and get a deal on that because the market collapsed and it was in a developing area, and I knew that the area was going to go and bounce back. And if I could go and like make it last long enough, then it would go and work. I kind of ended up getting what I was looking for in the end, if that makes sense, and I remember them, as an alternative example. I mean, the same thing happened when I was getting into MMA, when I was getting into mountain climbing, when I was doing a lot of different things where they were very cautious of like, yeah, you don't need to be doing that. And I would stubbornly either listen to them in some ways or some regards, or to just go about doing it myself. And, that gym experience, I think more than anything, I think it, definitely taught me that like nature of delayed gratification, and seeing something kind of like, come to life over a period of time, as opposed to like, the petulant side that wanted it, right away. But yeah, I think there was a lot of that conflict growing up, was like, my mom's perspective was, why can't you be more like your sisters? Why can't you be more like, less like cautious associated with, whatever it was that you're doing, and for me, it was always about the risk.
the risk profile of a mid 20-year-old does not need to be the same as a 55-year-old person. I mean, you shouldn't have the same risk profile. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you might as well go ahead and get the first, success or failure out of the way
For
and
sure.
jump into it. You're not going to learn it until you're doing something without a net. And when you put a good part of what you've got into a deal, as long as you're committed to see it through to the end, then generally you're going to be okay. But I was coaching somebody over the weekend and I said, hey, because the guy's had a lot of deals and, he probably hasn't gotten to where he wants to get. And I said, most deals are bad deals, but it's not for why you think. There's nothing wrong with the business plan. If you're willing to commit to it, it's probably going to work out as long as you're willing to stick with it long enough and you're willing to look at the numbers and make the decisions you need to make that make sense along the way. But most deals are bad deals just because there's a misalignment with the people that are involved. And if you get the wrong partners in a deal and they're not, they're expecting you to do something or you're expecting them to do something or people aren't as committed as you, then that's where generally business deals can go bad. So, kudos to you.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Wow.
I mean,
Is that still in business? Are you still in business with that thing?
I ended up selling it to the one of the general managers who managed it through the whole COVID period and did phenomenally.
Awesome.
I was able to keep it afloat, and they have since migrated into a new space, and very recently, so I've yet to see it. But I think the unexpected benefit too was the fact of, like you said, I think it's the journey with the people that you're experiencing something with, undoubtedly is fun, to go and just be a part of other people's lives and kind of see, what their experiences are in, different kinds of ways. Right. And
you're talking about the members or your partners?
Both. I think, it was, to see like just the, people meeting, falling in love, the babies that were born from the gym that wouldn't have been born, if we hadn't done it. It was training based, and performance based, right? I wanted to coach. And ironically too, I think another mistake in my 20s that I made was, we were like the 10th or 12th CrossFit gym, I think, in Atlanta. And the first CrossFit gym that I saw was CrossFit Atlanta. Dan McDougall was the owner of that box, and he was a lawyer. And it was very early days of CrossFit. I just heard about it, just found out about it, and I remember like going down to go and see his location, and seeing it was like people around my age that were kind of hungry young professionals that were flipping tires and like, beating them with sledgehammers and like, the pull-up bars and just kind of like it was like a clean kind of like more sterile environment. I went in a few other boxes that weren't as much. So it was, this kind of the early days. It was, very like, very Spartan, very kind of like a, rugged kind of like mentality, and it was a minimalist, and then went to the suburbs and was advised that like, being in the suburbs, you needed to have a little bit of a different environment. You needed to go and kind of build things out. You needed to go and make it kind of nice and pretty. And so did that and spent a lot of money that I probably didn't necessarily need to. Exactly. Yeah. The people that just wanted all the like the frou-frou stuff.
Yeah. I didn't want it, but they'll never use it. They'll never use it. You could put it
and had no idea too,
there, and you never even
exactly
the thing in.
It was like when I was there and like realized, I just remember like thinking kind of like eventually kind of like came to the realization that like the meaning of the whole like, location real estate, and it being a suburban environment, I was like, man, I really screwed up. And, it was, this is not what I was looking for. I think if I were to go and do it again, then I think my dream location would probably just be like just a roll up garage where people, there's just a paint can on the ground where somebody goes, they throw in their monthly dues and like,
yeah,
if there's an AR thing, it's like pin a sticky note on the wall or something,
right?
I'd have the courage to go and write your name on it.
Yeah, get some racks and get some sleds and get some AstroTurf down and, some rope, just have at it. Now, a lot of the attention that you got early on was related to wrestling. Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with wrestling and the people that you met along the way and ultimately what that has meant to you?
Yeah, it was initially so I was an obsessive like sports fan growing up. Um, you know, and whether it was, I think probably my biggest things, I was very into baseball before we moved down to Atlanta. It kind of remained that way, but I think then became very interested in basketball when I came down, and football. I got to have like a Fisher Price basketball hoop in my room, and I just go and shoot basketball and watch the Hawks all day. And there was also the became a huge Falcons fan. I got invited to go to the locker room and go and meet the guys, and going from playing nose guard to going into like meet uh the players and the Falcons. And I got a game ball from Jamal Anderson and Ray Buchanan. It was the like year before they won the Super Bowl, and it was kind of a big turning point for them.
I'm interested about the jiu-jitsu, and are there techniques? I've grappled just a teeny little bit. So, where are you most comfortable in jiu-jitsu? What do you like to do? You like to fight from your back, or like how do you go about it?
Yeah, I mean, I fell in love with it. It was I got choked out by a girl that was around 110 pounds, and like saw her choke somebody that was your size or even a little bit bigger the next day, and I was like, oh my god, like I fell in love with it. I had to learn it.
Oh yeah.
So I ended up moving, like I said, out to California to focus on training at it was one of the top training centers in the world. Um, I'd just gotten my fourth stripe on my blue belt. So it goes white belt, blue belt, purple belt, brown belt, black belt. So it was almost a purple belt, and thinking that like that was going to come around the corner. And I went out there and didn't get my purple belt, I think, for like a year and a half, 2 years or something like that after. And kind of very quickly learned too that like, uh, I think, like probably more than anything, my instructor, Professor Andre Galbao, he's, multi-time world champion, like basically like the LeBron James of the sport. And I think he would agree that I was probably on that like purple belt level, but I think from like a psychological perspective, I think he, ended up, holding me back and, kept me at that, spot. But it kind of made me hungry more than anything else. I think it just, was like the hunger and desire to, when a black belt would come in the room, like a visiting black belt, then like I'd want to go and bring it to him, so but yeah, I do a lot of different things from, you know, like from a guard position and playing on my back, like a half guard, kind of just like locking down and isolating one leg. And then end up, going for a lot of like arm chokes, basically is kind of like the bread and butter there, like guillotine kind of things. And then kind of like advanced into like different leg locks and that kind of stuff. And fought in the world championships twice. Ended up falling short and not placing, and kind of realized that it was just time to, move on and focus on other things. And that's basically what led me into the, mountaineering. So I'd climbed Kilimanjaro prior to coming out there, but the Aconcagua climb was kind of following the like failure of the Jiu-Jitsu World Championships, and thinking like, they just kind of needed some other challenge, and it ended up being by far, I think, that the hardest physical thing that I ever experienced at that point.
How technical is Kilimanjaro? Is it just endurance, and is there a lot of technicality to it?
Mostly endurance. And it was the technicality for me at least came. We had one day, it was called the Western Breach. So it was about halfway through like our initial schedule, and I was already beat up worse than I thought that I would be. And we ended up deciding to just go like, take like just a straight up path up the western side of the mountain. And it was kind of one brutal day, but then was able to cut off like 4 or 5 days of like the total trip time.
Okay.
And I think was a huge aspect of what ended up helping us summit. But that, that morning, I mean, waking up and like starting out, like, it was my first ever experience climbing on ice and getting to, having to fight through the, just the cold and the ice and like the dark and like, hearing boulders falling in different directions. It was, in that whole, the day, it was 12 hours. And I remember we were filming it for ESPN and got to like the tent that night in the Western Breach where we camped. And my buddy Takashi, who was filming it, he was like, well, tell me, like, what'd you learn? I don't remember exactly what it was that I said, but I just remember like, like the way that he said it, whatever it was, it just broke. I just immediately just kind of started to cry, and I was like, just this heavy overload of, the feeling and emotion of, everything that it took to go and get there to that point. And but I knew at that point too, I think when we hit the Western Breach, we're 900 feet from the summit. So there's, where I first started climbing was Stone Mountain in Atlanta. So it's 30 minutes away from where I live. Stone Mountain is, when I first started climbing was a tough climb for sure. But I think I knew if I was only one more Stone Mountain away that there was going to have to be an avalanche or meteor strike or something that was going to keep me from from reaching the summit. So
What was behind the emotion?
it was, I think when you go through like that, like a great like challenge or feat or battle of some sort, right? And then like you get to the other side of it, it's just like, whoa.
At that point, did you know you were going to summit?
Oh yeah, it was like very like, I knew for sure it was undoubtedly like there was anything that was going to keep us from reaching the summit at that point. But it was getting there to that point. I think I didn't know if I was going to live through the day kind of thing. It was one of those like touch and go kind of points where it was literally like the, I felt very much like, and it was a weird thing too, because I mean, when I say like live through the day, I was like, if I can't make it, like, where do we go? Like going down might be more dangerous than continuing to go up. But if I can't continue to go up, like, like, what do we do? So it was this, a brutal feeling of like, how do we make this work? And the, it was, so I think, but, just decided to continue to go and power through. And, it wasn't until Aconcagua, I think, that I had that kind of realization. It was, very similar kind of circumstance, and, not quite as like vertical and icy and dangerous when I realized this. It was more of like a long kind of like traverse day, but it was like, the realization of, I don't know if I physically can or can't achieve what it is that I need to go and achieve today. So I like literally any wasted calorie thought of like calories in, calories out in my head that I like literally can't focus on. I can't devote a single thought towards something that's going to like be even contemplative if I'm going to succeed or if I'm going to fail, if that makes sense. It's like, what's the point, right? Like you're there to go and find out like if you can't actually go and do it. And it's like, just to go and think of like, I can't devote a single thought towards like whether or not this is going to go and work. I just have to, any thought that like comes into my head as to whether or not that's going to be the case, I just literally have to go and like block it out and kind of continue to go and, focus on what I need to do.
What inspires you to have that kind of determination faced with a climb like that?
I think it's for sure the experiences and the, and the memories and all that comes, with it. I think it's the feeling of the experience itself. I think it's, something that's just written and coded inside of our DNA. I think for me, especially, I think just a unique aspect of like a kind of a choice. I think that I think that I've just always had inside me, that like, well, the choice being that there wasn't really a choice, the choice being that like, whatever it was that I was doing, I would just try to go and do and take on to, the fullest extent that I could in different kinds of ways, whether that was, video games or other stuff, and surrounding myself with other people that kind of have that same mentality. Some of my, best friends growing up and like friends that have been with me on those climbs too, like and we would go and have like, video game LAN parties in their basement, but they were just, like Halo and stuff like that, and like they're ruthless and like really, really good. And like,
Yeah.
But I was kind of like low man on the totem pole with them, but like just being in that environment, like I got really good. And then I would go and play with like, my buddies on the wrestling team and just absolutely murk and destroy everybody. And I was like, realized that like just there's, just the varying different like levels to things, that are associated with it, whatever it is that we're doing. Um, I think that's just surrounding myself with those people. I think very like, you know, there's those kind of moments where you go and look around the room and just, awe and wonder of, the environment itself. I think those are like very, very special moments.
Did you have groups of climbers that you trained with and that you attempted these summits with? Was it the same group, or did you kind of throw in with an expedition that was going up?
So I was initially, it was, so the kind of the way that ended up working out, my initial gym manager, Ben, connected me to another friend, a guy named Blake, who went to college with a guy named Dan. Dan ended up becoming one of my best friends later on, and like, is just taught me a tremendous about life. I mean, you mentioned the hero's journey, like that's been a huge, huge aspect of so many different things of what's, interested me. And Dan was one of the first ones that like taught me what that like actually like meant, and like the history of that. And Joseph Campbell, and it was very, very deep into the study of all of those different things. So it was when I met Dan, he just like had this vision of climbing a mountain and wanted to go and invite me to come along and do it with him. And he just, we had dinner together and he kind of pitched the idea and then played this song from, it was the song Time from the movie Inception. And he was like, if we do this climb, we can go and like put like a song, like do a video to this song. I was like, I'm in.
That's
Like,
that's,
so in.
that's all it took. Yeah.
All it took.
All right. Well,
I was just 100% like so locked in at that point. And but then it was, the whole journey to like figure out how to like make it work. And we went, sought out, a bunch of different people and options and different things of, how we're going to go and try to make it work. From there was, the fundraising aspect of things to like the, just the gear and equipment, the team itself.
right.
It
I
was,
saw a Nike commercial out there that must have been filmed in process.
it was, that was actually following. So the Aconcagua climb was,
Where is that, by the way?
so it's on the border of Argentina and Chile, like northern Argentina and kind of northern Chile, but it literally kind of borders the two. And it's in this like the Mendoza region of Argentina, which is home to the Malbec grape of French. It's originally like a French wine grape that was kind of like a trash like wine grape that they ended up bringing to Argentina and then replanting it and like growing it there in that environment, and it thrived. And it's my favorite wine by far. And from that region, and the like, so like just steaks and wine and kind of just ridiculous like experiences. The people there were incredible too in so many different ways, just very like open, like welcoming, kind of before we were even like famous in the area. But after we did the climb and came down, there was significant like press conference and interviews, and like kind of became like instantly famous in the area, like which was not something I expected or anticipated. It was just like a kind of just a cool like side thing that happened as a consequence of doing it and succeeding.
You've said that your early life was, both you and your family had a pursuit of normalcy for you, but yet you've done so many things in your life that are extraordinary. So you failed in that regard in terms of normal, because you've done so many incredible things. I mean, and so,
it's still kind of,
you overachieved.
I think it's also, what's interesting though is to hear you say that there's, I think the normalcy aspect of things for sure was so like deeply instilled and ingrained. I think that, so when like, there was media that came around, I think when I was 6th grade playing football, and, it was before even wrestling and all that, like I was on the news, and I got to go and do like a live interview on CNN. And it just was a very like, kind of always felt to some extent like out of place and unnatural in a lot of ways. I think so, it's funny to hear you say that, and I appreciate that. But in a lot of ways too, it's like, I think there was this serious aspect of it too. I think a lot of times when you go and, you experience like, you experience something like extraordinary, and a lot of people, it'll change them. And I think the benefit, of what I've gotten to go and experience for sure, there was, life experience associated with things, but I think there was, I was already surrounded by people that were incredible and extraordinary in so many different ways.
And we're just programmable machines, right? So what are the parameters by which we're limited? Well, number one, we're limited by what we know and what we've been exposed to. So, for example, the podcast to me has revitalized that I'm 55 years old, my curiosity in people. I've spent my entire life building businesses, and it's been great. I've had experiences and met people and gone places that I would have never been able to. I'm going to a Christmas party this weekend in Washington, D.C., and I have no business being in the room where I'm going, but you know what? I'm going and I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable
Right?
going there. The wife, on the other hand, but it'll be amazing, because the people that we know and that we will know is going to be incredible. So we have parameters based upon what we know. And then the other thing, which applies directly to you, is our will is an exhaustible resource. So like some people find a way to have a battery that just allows them to just push all the way through. And I'm always, walking into this conversation, what I walked into the room with is, I really wanted to understand how and why you are able to find the, what fuels your passion to continue over and over again to do great things and do things that most people would never attempt to do. I Googled Kilimanjaro and said, after spending my time with you yesterday on my own doing research, I said, why in the world, that's not a technical climb, I could do that.
Yep.
And, so the question is why wouldn't I do that? And I've got to have a good answer for that to pursue that. Um, with everything that you've had and everything that you've learned and all the exploration that you've done of pushing yourself and inside of your purpose and your passion, and I like the reason that you gave is to, because you've done it. You've done it with people, you've got stories, you've got connection. uh that's a good enough reason in and of itself for doing something outside of the things that you normally talk about. What are some of the coolest experiences that you've had or the coolest people that you've met? I saw one thing where you on the Tim Ferriss television show, and he referenced that he met you in Napa drinking wine, a few months. And I'm like, well, you know what? In Napa drinking wine with Tim Ferriss, like I would put that down as like cool. Something that I think would be very interesting to do, certainly from his perspective and all the way he takes his take on the world. What are some of the things that you don't talk about a lot that would be a really cool experience or cool people that you've spent time with?
That one is big. I mean, Jordan Peterson chasing him down to go and shake his hand was pretty big. I was telling my roommate Timmy about he's an amazing character himself, Disney Imagineer, and like, just this crazy mad scientist. But like very like just amazing in so many ways and brilliant. But I was telling him about like meeting Schwarzenegger, and like it was at the Arnold Classic. I went there to go and I was involved in like powerlifting at that time. So I did like a 360-pound competition press, which is kind of my most in like competition at that point. And then went and signed up for before I never really even heard. I mean, I'd heard of jiu-jitsu. I'd seen like some Gracie videos, but I'd never really been exposed to it. I was just a wrestler, and I signed up for a tournament in Columbus.
They say like a Gracie blue belt is equal to most places black belts.
Yeah, it was like, and I think that like, the wrestling background helped me with that. But like, it was, and obviously the disability, I mean, obviously I think that like the nature of the disability, like just, gives people like, it's instant, like, reason to connect. I think that these experiences would have been like obviously cool experiences, without the disability. But I think with the disability, then it's, gives people kind of a different, like, different window to connect. But I remember like, I had never been exposed to jiu-jitsu and ended up like going and like, competing in this tournament. And then, I was winning in points. Like I got a 3-hour lesson from a guy named Steve Maxwell, which was like an early American black belt, and then later kind of found out like, him being a, just freaking like absolute legend. And like, but like nobody had, really heard of him outside of the jiu-jitsu community. And I ended up getting choked out and I lost the match, but there was a standing ovation. It was like, a few weeks, maybe months later that I came home, and like, I was, going to school at UGA, and that's when I went and got invited into the hardcore gym, and was choked out by the girl that I mentioned. But then like I was around these like other people in the gym that were like, Forrest Griffin, who was like a UFC champion, and I was training with him, and he was he was like on the Ultimate Fighter show at the time and ended up winning the season, and with this like epic like fight with Stephen Bonner. But I've like I've sat with Forrest in the corner of his fights. I was there 30, 20, 25, 30 feet from the cage when he won the world, when he won the UFC belt. I was, sitting in the locker room with Randy Couture before he went and walked out to, fight Vitor Belfort. And I was 18 years old. It was like, it was just such a like kind of like surreal kind of like wild experience in so many different ways. The Tim Ferriss thing, absolutely 100% was like, I got invited to, I just heard about him doing this book launch seminar, and it was called Opening the Kimono, and like just showed like how they go and like launch products in different kinds of ways. And I was like, just sent his assistant an email and was like, hey, this is my background, like would you be open to me coming in and checking it out? And he said that He's like, yeah, and just showed up and like befriended him. But at the conference, met so many other amazing people, and it was. But I think a lot of those too, for sure. There's like the Jim Carrey Yes Man movie, where it's like you just it's kind of there's some truth to that, right? Like it's just you gotta gotta just say yes to these kind of different kinds of things and see
Oh,
what
the
ends
answer
up
should
happening.
always be yes. It should always be yes, unless you can find a good reason for it to
For
be
sure,
no.
right? So you can find a good reason not to.
Uh,
But there's also that too. I think it's as on the counterpoint though, it's things you say no to might be a lot of times more important than like the things that you say yes to. It kind of
True.
depends. It's like
Yeah.
if you have the ability to be able to go and say no to things, I think that like, but I think that balance, right? I think it's the nature of, like you said, like with the normalcy comment, like it's life being anything but um that didn't happen as a consequence, I think, of not agreeing to go and take
Yeah.
on different things and different challenges, having no idea what like would lay in wait.
Well, we can't let fearfulness be a reason that we say no to something, or worthiness.
Right.
We are worthy. We do not need to be fearful. And
And everybody is in their own way, like
that's right.
every single person that's listening to this, it's like to different extents and different degrees, is like has that like thing inside of them that is like uniquely them. I think that is, like that like piece of the essence of the soul is, I think that's what we carry with us. And the people that go and rub off on us in different ways. Like I was thinking that recently, like, with my family and friends, like, what were the like the biggest lessons that they taught me? I can't name them like in the same way that I could name the like lessons that like Jordan Peterson taught me. Um, but my mom, for instance, she was just like, her mentality is try to be friends with everybody because you never know when you're going to need it.
Yeah.
And like her, like whether it was like the the bad kids, the good kids, the jocks, the nerds, like, you never know who like you're gonna need as a friend. So it's, you may as well like, befriend them. She also was, in terms of wrestling, her mentality was like, put the guy in enough pain on the mat, that he no longer wants to be on the mat with you. My dad's was much more of like, just like, finesse. And it's, I think the nature of, those kind of, those things that like, like if I were to go and think about like the specifics of like the lessons that they taught me, I think it's very different than like just like the experience of them as, as human beings and being around them. And the fact that I feel, very fortunate that, I've had the family that I've had for sure. And it's, um, it's also, but that balance too, right? Like their whole thing was, that like normalcy, and then being in other environments where I'm in a very, a normal state with like, uh, people that I never would have dreamed that I would have, that would have gotten them to meet and befriend.
You said something. You said we are all disabled in some way. Yours are just more visible. And I took that quote and I thought it was really insightful, because we all struggle with things mentally. There's people that don't have physical challenges like you were born with, that struggle, underperform for different ways, don't do all the things that they dream that they might want to do. Um, when you think about disabilities, and I don't know to the extent that you advocate for disabled people, are there any policies that you think need to be changed or considered out there for any types of disabilities that people have today?
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, I think there's always that. I think it's, yeah, accessibility, I think is, we take for granted the fact that like, everything that we have, I think in America has really led the way in a lot of accessibility, just, I remember my mom, fighting to get the, like there's a curb cut, outside of the neighborhood so that my, I could, ride my chair to, you know, ride my chair to school instead of being relying on somebody to take me back and forth. And, that was, it was just that curb cut was, life changing, the amount of independence that it was able to go and give me. Um, I think the, the frustrating difference that I go and experience is just like, sometimes a lot of it can be met with like incessant, like whiny, complainy kind of like vibes, if that makes sense. And I think to go and, try to do our best to like, squeaky wheel gets the grease, but like also try to avoid that, it's,
Right.
I think the world would be a much better place if we literally just did away with political parties. Imagine that. Imagine if you actually had to literally like pay attention to what somebody like said to vote.
Yes.
If there wasn't a Republican or Democrat party, like, just that one change, you would literally have to actually pay attention to what somebody says instead of just going to the voting machine and saying, I'm a part of this tribe and I'm going to click this button.
Right.
And, because it's like, this is generally like an issue of the left, right? That like accessibility becomes a factor, generally associated with that, but like, to the degree that like that makes sense to me, it's always kind of plagued me with like different like things associated with politics in general. It's like there's just so many better ways to go and do things, and yet why do we go and operate the way that we go and do? And like it just doesn't, never really added up. And I think it's, I think as I've gotten older, I've kind of come to accept the fact that like, there's just a bunch of things in the world that operate the way that they do that I don't necessarily understand them. And like, that's okay. But I think that like, there's extraordinarily more efficient, like, solutions in so many different ways. But a lot of times you don't necessarily know until like you get there and try it out. It's sometimes too, especially with people with disabilities, there's like, just, I think the, stretching the limits of like, the individual's capacity, trying different kinds of things. I think that there has to be that like aspect of reflection, for people. Is it like, are you yourself like doing like all that you can to like, experience whatever place it is that you want to go and experience, like what is the hold up there? My guide, Kevin, my mountain guide, he, one of the reasons that we worked with him is that he had like extensive like experience like climbing with people with disabilities. He had been the base camp manager for Eric Weinmeyer, who was the first blind climber to summit Everest and did all 7 summits. It was incredible. He had led a team of blind climbers up Kilimanjaro, and he had also led somebody that did it on a bike, and literally hand crank bike. And certain segments and sections, they would go and lay down boards and plates, and he would roll over the the bike, and the gravel and the scree going up this massively vertical like stuff. I have a hard time fathoming like how he actually pulled it off and did it. It's pretty nuts. So there are people out there obviously that are that are attempting to go and take things to those levels to go and figure out in terms of accessibility. So then somebody on the other side, that just wants to like take kind of a victim role and complain about something that's, just to go and get something done. I have a hard time having compassion for that. But
Yeah, I mean,
it's
it's obstacles make us stronger, and when there's a crisis and you really want to get something done, then you find a way relatively quickly to get things done. And
yeah, yeah, no, it's like
yeah,
that's what we said, energy goes, the attention flows where the energy goes, and
yeah,
sometimes it takes those things to go and have people like, have a sense of, that get up and go factor. Other things, it's easier for people to just kind of sit back and, hope that things go well. But the nature of that quote too, like you said, and the reason for that in the book is the fact that like every single person has a disability. Everybody does. There's a host of range of different things, in so many different ways that would be, or just everybody has their own individual strengths and weaknesses and like, inner different, challenges and all kinds of stuff associated with, with being a human being.
yeah,
Whether it's being uh, a son or a daughter or parent or grandparent or coach, mentor, boss, employee, etc. Wherever somebody fits in, I mean, there's strengths and weaknesses associated with all of that. I think it's, just the, I think having the awareness for people to go and identify what those things are, for sure,
yeah,
I think is a significant factor. Um, and like I said, I mean, the nature of you having these conversations with people too, I think that's like, it's just such a gift to be able to go and see like where something goes, and see kind of like inside somebody's kind of unique, like their soul, their psyche, and be able to go and share it with others.
yeah. It's a blessing. It is. You've had a great speaking career. At least from what I can tell, I've watched several of your clips online. Very motivational, excellent speaker. Who do you speak to, and how do those opportunities come up for you? And is that something that you're doing a lot of right now?
I think it's, yeah. So it's, over the years. So it's when I first started, um, went through like a, massive, like different kind of like, shift and change associated with, uh, early on to present day. Quite ironically, so it was, when the book first came out, um, I was like literally went from overnight being like a college student to then, New York Times bestselling author with,
Yep.
the day Oprah said, like, this is an inspirational book. It hit #1 on Amazon. And then all of a sudden I was like, speaking all these different groups all over the,
Yep.
all over the country and some international,
And for the
and,
audience, the name of the book is No Excuses.
no excuses. And so it was, there was just a huge range. It was, from like, basically like, you know, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, colleges, up to like Fortune 500 companies to, you know, uh, different like, military bases to like, special forces, the whole range and gamut, like literally like everything, and sports teams to like random events. It was, kind of every single group. Um, and still something I do, pretty consistently now. And I've kind of like focused, I think, a bit more on like the nature of I think that the future aspects of, the speaking for me in a lot of ways are going to be on, a lot more, hopefully like outcome oriented. I think that's the goal more than anything else, is like seeing people actually like take and produce and create something. And I think that's,
So maybe
kind of
more towards a master class or something like that, something that people can take your motivation and have a method to turn it into something for them.
exactly. Yeah. I think that, it's, I think we get like, I think there's an aspect of, how to put the best way to put this, but like limitation associated with like growth, right? If you're doing something where you're not necessarily growing, then, um, yeah, you might be doing that for a multitude of different reasons.
Yeah.
But I think it's, for me, I think that like the speaking in general, it's kind of hit like, critical mass of, kind of share my story and different things over the years. But I think that, focusing more on things that are going to go and kind of push me to grow, I think are going to be, that's significantly more of the goal coming up, I think.
Yeah, I think from
So
a business, like you've got to find like your through line that's authentic to you. And then once you find that through line, you got to create your content and your stories around it. And then you've got to find the audience that needs it. Obviously, the book, the content that's available, your life, your story, your journey, in and of itself is motivational. Now, how did that manifest? So, okay, well, I can tell you how it manifested. I mean, I go to a trainer Monday morning. So I was in there at 6 a.m. this morning, and I know that I was not working that hard, and I was thinking about talking to you today, and I was thinking about what I was going to ask you, and looking forward to it and all that. And I caught myself in the mirror, and I'm like, and this is how hard you're working. Like you were, I was like, I was phoning it in, man. And I just flipped the switch, and I'm like, well, I know how Kyle would approach this workout. Like he would be getting after it right now. And I did, so, I mean, in that little moment, inside of that, I was, because what do? We feel sorry for ourselves. Oh, I should, I'm tired of this or that, or I got this much, and your mind's everywhere, but where it needs to be is focusing intently on exactly what it is that you've decided that you need to do. So I know that with
yeah, for that, it's like
yeah,
when you're there for a purpose, and it's like, if you're going to go and take the time to like, go do the workout, then you may as well like
you're there
put it out
anyway.
there.
You're
Exactly.
there. Yeah.
So but at the, I mean, I for sure don't want to give people that like impression that like I don't have that like, like similar struggles all the time with different things associated with like that kind of stuff. There's seasons associated with stuff for sure.
Oh yeah.
It's, it's the, I thought that like when I opened the gym that somehow that was going to like cure the like, resistance to like, to train, every day or twice a day or whatever. Right. And then all of a sudden it was like, whoa, anything, that was the complete opposite. It was, like all of a sudden I remember like, I'd be mid workout, and someone would want to like come up and like talk about their membership or something. I was just like, not the time,
Yeah.
but it was, it was funny to see like definitely had a, different effect. There's always those unintended consequences associated with different things.
Right.
It's, that's just the nature of life, I suppose.
Yeah.
But the, yeah, it's, I mean, for sure, it's path and direction.
Yeah.
The, like you look at like a stock market, it goes up, it goes down, but like long term trending up and to the right. So it's, yeah, I think life kind of does the same thing in a lot of different ways. I think if we have our like, eyes set in that direction, but we don't necessarily know what's going to be around the corner.
Do you know what's next
Yeah.
for you?
Um, I've got like a few things lined up between now and Christmas. In terms of work related stuff, my roommate Timmy that I mentioned is like I said, he's a Disney Imagineer, former Disney Imagineer, and now he's got a new contract potentially to go and build an escape room. One of the largest escape room companies, if not the largest escape room company in the world's contracted him to go and build one up, actually very close to you. So up like Charlotte area. And so I think I've never built anything before. I think it'd be cool to like actually participate and, like physically building something. So yeah, that's a potential thing that's kind of on the radar. Um, Next year we talked about potentially doing Mount Fuji, I think in August. So it's, climbing Japan. There's which wouldn't necessarily be like, like a Aconcagua or Kilimanjaro climb. I think it's, significantly more of like people go there, it's like a spiritual experience, and
Right.
I've got a cousin that was like, for Thanksgiving, who was talking about, he just got back from doing Machu Picchu. I think that would be
Right.
cool to see. And, different friends. I mentioned, my buddies, that were former SEALs that are now, kind of building their own different, like, different experiences where they're going to go and, one down in Florida, the other in Virginia Beach. But their plan is they've got, like a, shooting ranges and survival kind of like experiences and like,
Right.
teaching different stuff of, uh, range related stuff, house entry stuff, combatives, you know, hunting, gathering, foraging kind of different stuff, so, and they've got, very cool people around them in different ways to, go and help and support. So I think, I think that'd be fun. Yeah, it's, there's, I think that's, this kind of the fluidity of being able to like just experience things as they come, I think is kind of, kind of where I'm at currently, not necessarily knowing what things are gonna, bring on the other side. But I think that's, I think before, especially when I was younger, I was always like dead set on, thinking of, okay, like this chunk of time, to go do this or that or whatever, whether it was gym, jiu-jitsu, other stuff, where it was like, just kind of dialed in and detailed in terms of like, like a segmented like chunk of time. Like I knew in jiu-jitsu to compete for the world championships, age was going to be a significant factor. So the, being in my late 20s, I was old by comparison to a lot of other people that were, that were there. And, then, kind of when I crept into my 30s, I was like, okay, well, it's probably all she wrote for like competing at, like in that age bracket for a jiu-jitsu world championship. There's a handful of people like, my jiu-jitsu professor Galbao, Andre Galbao, he was, I think, he was around my age, maybe even might have been a bit older. I think, it was kind of like an anomaly. There was like, somebody like a Tom Brady, like, it's like 40 years old that's still like, out there winning Super Bowls.
Right.
It doesn't happen that often. Unusual. So the, I think the, to answer that question, it's kind of balance associated with things of, But I think by my dream more than anything else, I think, like you said, I think it's, that kind of like master class kind of thing. And like the deeper, like understanding and excursion aspect of, taking things on and studying things to a different level and degree. I think that's, I think that's for sure probably a big aspect of what the next few years are going to bring.
Yeah. Well, Kyle, whatever it is you choose to do, I know that you will do it well and you will do it completely because that's what you do. It's been incredible having you on today, Kyle. I've really enjoyed it, getting to know you. Last question. If you had one sentence to make an impact in someone's life, kind of a go-to, that's not the title of your book, or maybe it is, no excuses. But if you had that one sentence to make an impact in someone's life, what might that be?
There's a Joseph Campbell quote. He says, follow your bliss and the universe will open doors where previously there were only walls. I think it's, I think it's pretty, remarkable. And I think it's true. I think it's, what's the nature of, your like, bliss. It's funny that Jordan Peterson, he has a problem with that word. And as much as I love him, he's always like, he's always like dog that word in every interview that I've seen him like talk about it.
Bliss?
Because bliss is like, it's like,
oh, Jordan.
it's kind of
Jordan
like
lives in the unsettled. He likes things to be.
Yeah, right.
He likes things to be a little unsettled.
But things, I think, I think for sure, bliss for different people, I think would mean different things. I think what he wants, to avoid people having that like sense of, just like, the lack of the understanding of the fact that like suffering itself is such a necessary component.
Yeah.
And like, you have to be able to suffer.
It's a difference between happiness and fulfillment. I mean, happiness is really unattainable probably over time, but being fulfilled through our works, our suffering, our contribution, the impact we make to the people around us, those are, if you can accomplish that, I think we've done pretty well.
Yeah, I think and it's, it's, one of the things Cam talks about too, it's, like the kind of the main like gift of that is, it's the ability to go through those trials and then, you turn around and pass that gift on to somebody else.
Yeah.
It's, I think he said it's like, returning with the elixir was the name of it. The hero's journey. But it's, taking that like thing and like being able to like, the lessons associated with whatever it is that you learn and being able to pass that on to the next generation. Someone there to be able to go and carry that, like, carry that torch forward. So it's, but yeah, I love it. And I think, I love the nature of these conversations more than anything too is, it's a very unique thing as opposed to like, with a speech is just a very linear kind of exploration. I think with these conversations, things, kind of go in different and interesting directions.
Well, I've certainly enjoyed it. Kyle, how can people reach you?
The best way, I think, contact wise would just be through my website. I think there's like a email submit contact form on there. And, those generally will make their way to me over time. And if it's, kind of related to some kind of event or appearance or something like that, then, my longtime best friend, business manager, Joey. He'll be on there to answer the, answer any request on there if anybody has any sort of interest. So, but yeah, thank you, Jeff. Likewise, this has been great. So appreciate you taking the time, and looking forward to what you produce with these episodes too.
Yeah, well, it's been a pleasure and an honor. That's Kyle Maynard, Maynard, for those who are searching to get in touch with Kyle. Kyle, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today and your wisdom on the home front.
Thanks so much, Jeff.